Hi, and welcome to the Leadership and Learning Center's national webinar on turning schools around. My name is Lissa Pijanowski, and I'm thrilled that you were able to join us. And we will jump right in and get started with some of our logistics. Again, my name is Lissa Pijanowski. I'm so happy to serve as the National Director for School Improvement Partnerships at the Center, and recently just presented at the National Title I Conference, so I see some names that joined me there, as well as in Arkansas at a School Improvement Summit. We're thrilled to have all of you joining us to talk more about how tough it is to turn around our schools. We have a few School Improvement Summits coming up. We're very pleased to be offering our summits once again. We have 5 summits planned thus far, and you can see we're going to be everywhere from Portland to Chicago and back to Vegas. If you want more information about our conferences, please feel free to contact Brooke Little. We do have agendas online, and we have a very engaging panel of keynoters as well as our own Leadership and Learning Center consultants that will be delivering the content at these conferences. So you can see here we're very lucky to have Tyrone Howard, Elise Foster, and Mike Schmoker joining us as guest keynoters. And then we also, again, have several of our wonderful consultants that many of you know. Kathy Lassiter will be with us, Steve Ventura, myself, and Karen Branscombe will all be presenters at our School Improvement Summits. And we hope that several of you will join us, and you'll learn more during the webinar about what our content will feature. So let's go ahead and jump into some of the content for which you're joining us today. The title of our webinar, as you know, is Turning Schools Around is Tough Work. And one of the things that we really want to explore is, do we still need school improvement? Do we still need to improve our schools? And we've been doing school improvement for a long time. It's been in many different forms. So let's talk about first the need. So this is a map of the United States, and all states in blue now have the ESEA flexibility. States that are in green are those that are under consideration. Now within those, as you're well aware, each state has to define their priority and focus schools. With the states that are already approved, we have over 6,300 priority and focus schools in our nation. So is the need there? Absolutely. You can see here that even our Secretary of Education recognizes that turning around our lowest performing schools is hard work, but it is our responsibility, and it has huge ramifications for our children. So when we're looking at what schools actually are required to do, what they're actually what they're required to balance, if the school receives a school improvement grant or has Title I funds, schools are required to embed either the 8 essential elements or the turnaround principles in their work. Now, if you look at this list, there are a lot of things there that take a great deal of time and sometimes are really well focused and sometimes not so much. And you tie that into new teacher evaluation, new Common Core standards, new leadership evaluation, and the new accountability systems within each state, and it can be quite overwhelming. Let me share with you. Yeah.
Stephen has asked if you could review ESCA.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you for that question. Yes, it's the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, and it is replacing, it's really been the law for a long time. It was where No Child Left Behind stemmed, and now we have new accountability waivers for each state that is replacing No Child Left Behind. And it requires every state to define the standards that they're going to teach, which actually has drawn us to adopting the Common Core in most of the states, as well as a teacher and leader evaluation tied to results. And then finally, accountability, which is where instead of having needs improvement schools, we now have to identify priority and focus schools. Great question, Stephen. Thank you, Kathy. So one of the things I wanted to explore was just Friday, Valentine's Day, February 14th, the United States Department of Ed released some new data. And in their report, it was the National Assessment Results Summary for their cohorts 1 and 2. So several of you on the line probably have schools that are receiving school improvement grant funding. Well, of course, the United States Department of Ed follows those schools and their achievement. And one of the things I'd like to share with you is the reading achievement of those schools receiving SIG grants. Now, you can see in blue, this was their pre-funding performance versus now year 1 is the red and year 2 is the green. Now, if you're noticing, as I am, the percentage points of increase over the years of increased funding are not great. Let's look at math. Same thing holds true. The greatest area of growth was in SIG cohort 1, 34 to 41%. But if you look across all schools, you can see that we are not probably making the gains that we would like. Now, we serve several schools that are school improvement grant recipients as well. But I'll say to you that there is a difference in some of the schools in terms of the ones that we're serving and what we're seeing in this broader data. And I want to ask you, if these schools are receiving this amount of funding and additional support, what do you think contributes to these results? Now, in many of the schools that we go to serve in our initial meetings, we find that they are quite overwhelmed with all the initiatives, with the additional funding, and with everything that's on their plate. So we're going to ask you to participate in a poll with us. We're going to ask if you choose one of these. Now, you may find that several of these are barriers for the schools that are struggling, but if you could just do a forced choice, if you will, and choose one. Is it the lack of focus? Is it poor implementation of what they have chosen to implement? Is it weak instruction, or is it ineffective leadership? If you would, you can see the poll is open. If you could participate in that and choose one single response, we would appreciate it. We're going to give you a couple seconds to do that.
Okay, and we have about 50% voted so far, so we'll keep it open for another 10 seconds. How's that?
Perfect. One of the schools that we went to initially go serve that has a school improvement grant is a high school, and when we went in, we asked them if we could see their school improvement plan. And they asked us, well, which one? And I said, well, your school improvement plan that drives your work. And they said, well, we have a school improvement plan, and we have a business plan, and we have a plan that we submit to the state. And I thought,
I
wow.
think we're going to close the poll, and we're going to get the results. And
okay.
And I believe, Lissa, you can see the results?
I can. It's very interesting. About 22% lack of focus, 36 poor implementation, 24 weak instruction, and 18 ineffective leadership. Not too surprising. It's kind of a split, isn't it, across the board, but the highest one being poor implementation. And that is exactly what we find as well. Thank you very much for participating in that poll. And as I worked with this high school, one of the things that we had to do is we had to get them focused on a set of practices that would help them in their work. And of course, getting them down to one improvement plan was our first goal. So the question that I want to raise now is there a set of research-based practices that are proven to make gains? And people ask us this all the time. There's lots of literature about improving our schools. And one thing that we have done at the Leadership and Learning Center is for well over 10, 15 years, we've been studying what works in schools. And as we've been out in the field, we've been gathering that information. And one study in particular kind of launched our school improvement work. And many of you may be familiar with the 90-90-90 study. It was conducted by Dr. Douglas Reeves. It looked at schools that served 90% of their students that were minority, 90% that were also free and reduced lunch or poverty, but they were achieving at greater than 90% proficient on their state assessments. So what Dr. Reeves did was he looked at what were the characteristics across those schools that really helped them to achieve. And he found 5 characteristics. We took those 5. And we also looked at the requirements from the federal government about what's actually needed. And we started to define those around 3 different categories of practices. So over 10 years of research on what works in schools, we came up with 3 categories: accountability, classroom, and school practices. And in those accountability practices, one of the things that we looked at is how well are schools planning, implementing, and monitoring? How are leaders and teachers leading those school improvement efforts and making sure that they're monitoring for results? And then the second one was really, how are they embedding instructional data teams into the fabric of their school? Content data teams at the secondary level. How is that actually being done? And are they analyzing to make better decisions about instruction? And then the classroom, these are not going to look too unordinary to you. Standards-based classroom instruction, curriculum, formative assessment, and then the literacy. Now, all 4 of those, you would think that seems to be the case in every school, that those would be first and foremost in every single classroom. And what we find is that oftentimes there is a lack of understanding or clarity around what we are supposed to teach. Oftentimes teachers are begging for, what are the best strategies that have the biggest impact? How do we monitor that? And of course, as you know, in turnaround schools, literacy is first and foremost. So we made sure that we kept literacy in there as a classroom practice. And then finally, we look at the school practices, learning environment and school culture, making sure we have that collective responsibility around all students being able to learn and perform at high levels. Professional learning, the learning for the adults in the building is just important as the learning for the children, and then how we engage the community. So you can see that of all 9 of these are all elements of effective schools. Now you might ask, we have a struggling school, how can we do all 9? Well, one of the things that we've done is we've actually defined it in more depth. We feel like that folks that really need some additional support, they are asking us all the time, what does it look like? What does it look like if I'm actually going to implement formative assessment in my classroom? So for each of those 9 foundational practices, the Leadership and Learning Center has defined standards within those practices, as well as proficiency statements for schools to gauge whether or not they are progressing, proficient, exemplary, or maybe they really haven't even hit the mark in terms of getting started. But one way we actually coach schools in doing that is looking at, what kind of evidence and artifacts do you have that are tangible, that we can observe, that we can see where this is actually happening. We often find that when surveyed, teachers will say one thing, but when you actually go out and observe it in the classroom, sometimes you see a different picture. And so having these formative assessment and all these rubrics, it really helps to ensure that we're headed on the right track. So let's take another poll. If you were to think about the 3 categories of those foundational practices and the school practices, which of those represent your greatest need? Now, you can actually do multiple responses for this one, but if accountability, classroom, or school practices, which one represents your greatest need? If you would join us in that poll now. Fantastic.
Okay, Lissa, everyone is answering this one very quickly. We're already at 70%.
Great.
This is a good one. I'll give it another 10 seconds.
This is fantastic. We appreciate your participation. It always makes it much more engaging to know your audience and see what you guys are focusing in on as well.
Okay, 3, 2, 1. I'm going to share the results. Yeah.
Perfect. All right. Not too surprising on this one either. Great. So 61% of you said that classroom practices would be really your greatest need, which is, of course, our standards, curriculum, and assessment. Probably has a lot to do with Common Core implementation. 49% of you accountability practices, and then the 28% school practices. Fantastic. Well, in an effort to really work on those, one thing that is also asked of us is, okay, where do you start? If you've got 9 practices and you've got these 3 different how do you know where to start with some of your schools? So in doing that, when you think about that question, where to start, we really wanted to provide some tools for schools, and you guys have some of these tools on your own as well. Really having a comprehensive needs assessment. If you currently serve a Title I school, you're required to do a needs assessment annually. Many folks, as part of accreditation, do needs assessments. But what we find is that needs assessments really need to have certain elements. And to bring focus to the work, there needs to be more than just a survey. We actually have 4 elements within a needs assessment, and would recommend that if you have one on your own, that you consider pulling in some of these other ones. So you obviously, when you're looking at a school that you're serving for school improvement, you want to make sure that you review closely documents and their data. Now, I will say that oftentimes we do a really great job of a deep dive in data, especially the state assessment data. We have graphs and charts, but I would say that some of the other data that we really need to look into are curriculum documents. And having noted that you said classroom practices is probably your greatest need, if you were to dig a little bit deeper in your needs assessments around what curriculum documents are our teachers using, let's look at our lesson plans, our pacing guides. What is it that's really driving the teacher's work? Sometimes online surveys, we survey not only staff and parents, but we believe that student voice has a big part to play in improving our schools. So we always involve the student in providing us feedback on the schools. And then, of course, observing in the classrooms, looking for certain things, not just a few classrooms, but every classroom. When we do a needs assessment, we have a couple different evaluators on site, and we go to every classroom at least twice. It provides a fabulous overview of the instructional environment of the school. And then, of course, beyond just the surveys, having some stakeholder interviews to balance out what's reported online in a survey, having interviews and conversations with key stakeholders, again, including students, is always very telling. Now, one thing that's always important about doing a needs assessment is providing immediate feedback. So one of the things that we do is we actually provide an immediate results in terms of the surveys of all stakeholders. This is just a snapshot of one question asked in a teacher survey. All open-ended response questions are also provided in terms of their responses. And, we would recommend that you have surveys like this as well, that I think sometimes teachers take surveys and leaders take surveys and they're never really sure about the results. And it's just with student learning, we need to give that feedback. Adults need that same kind of feedback. There's a snapshot of our classroom observations. This is just one small part of classroom observations, but it's really very telling what you can glean in terms of instruction in a classroom based on what you're able to view in walkthroughs across the school. And then all of the results of the needs assessment are always tied back to those 9 instructional or foundational practices, rather. And the purpose of that is that we need to provide that focus. The where to start, the roadmap, really needs to be driven by the needs assessment. And schools can't work on all 9, but having this type of a roadmap helps them in determining where do I start. And it might be that in year 1, you're really working on the curriculum and the assessment, and in year 2, you're working on instruction and data teams. But the data and the needs for school improvement really need to be driven by what you're actually seeing happening in the schools. And I would venture to say that we do a fairly good job of, again, surveying, gathering data, but really digging into that and tying it back to what we know works, and the research-based practices are really critical. So in our first question, several of you mentioned implementation as the biggest barrier. So why is it that we struggle with implementing plans and monitoring results? So let's explore that just a little bit. Now, some of you who have possibly heard me talk about school improvement before know that I love to equate school improvement sometimes with chasing squirrels. This is my golden retriever, Belle, and you can go to the back door, and whether there's a squirrel out there or not, you can say, "Look, Belle, a squirrel," and she runs after it. And it's not too dissimilar with how we sometimes react in education when we're presented with new initiatives or new things that we feel that we need to implement. Oftentimes, we're very easily distracted, and we run in different directions. And one of the greatest challenges for us in terms of implementation is making sure that we have a clear focus. And one of the things that I'd love to offer folks when you're joining us on a webinar, some tools that you can take with you and possibly use in your own setting. One of the things that we talk about often is how important it is to weed the garden, if you will. You know, there are lots of things, and that the high school that I mentioned earlier that had 3 different school improvement plans, well, not only did they have 3 different plans, but on those 3 plans there were over 40 different strategies and listed. And no school, no matter how dedicated and fabulous the leaders and teachers are, can implement adequately over 40 different strategies. So one of the things that we know to be true is that in implementation, we really need to look at the things we're being asked to implement and determine, are we really using it? And then ask ourselves a second question. Is the evidence that we have, is it related to improved student achievement? Now, this is a really great document that you can use with staff, just identifying initiatives, programs, things that you have going on in your building, and look at, on the bottom, the degree of implementation. Is it low? Is it high? And then look at towards, on your left side of the grid, you know, what's the impact of implementation, of achievement? And is it low or high? And if it's something that you find that is maybe a lower degree of implementation, but it's getting great results. So let's say you've got a team of teachers that's really doing a great job with their data teams process, and they are working well as a team, and they're monitoring results, and the kids are achieving at a higher rate than some other grade levels or teams. Then the impact on achievement is great, but it's not happening in all of your teams. So it actually would fall in that replicate column, where you would actually see that we need to replicate what's working and not disregard. In some cases, you may have things that have low degrees of implementation and are not having a great impact on achievement. Those may be things that need to be weeded, or things that may need to be evaluated may have something that everybody's doing, but we don't know if it's having an impact on achievement, or it maybe is not, but everybody's doing it. So it's taking away from other instructional time. So you can see where I'm going with this. I would encourage you to have this kind of conversation in your districts and things around, you know, what should we be replicating, what should we be evaluating, weeding, and then of course those things that we know are working and we know teachers are embracing, students are engaged with, we need to be strategic about sustaining those as well. My colleague, Brian McNulty, many of you may know him from his work with Bob Marzano and Tim Waters on leadership. He's always said the only way we can close the achievement gap is by closing the implementation gap. And if there's one thing I always hear, and my colleagues across the center always hear it when we go to schools, is that, you know, I don't know that we tried this long enough to see if it works. Or, well, that's last year's old thing, this year's new thing. And you hear this undercurrent of frustration from leaders and teachers about the revolving door of programs and initiatives. And we really have to be very cognizant of that and be courageous enough to ask the right questions. Is it really being implemented, and is it having an impact on student achievement? And if not, we need to get rid of it so we can implement the things that do matter and implement them well. Research on implementation states that you really can do no more than 6 different things at a time. When I ask groups of educators, how many things do you have going on in your building or in your district, you can just imagine that the list goes far beyond 10, and especially if you ask classroom teachers, if you think about what they are asked to implement. And I would say that the research on implementation states that you can do no more than 6. I would even venture to say you really should do no more than 3. In terms of school improvement goals, there really should be no more than 3. School improvement plans are written annually. What a school can actually truly focus in on and truly implement well with aligned professional learning experiences and collaboration, no more than 3. The research actually goes a little bit further and says that if you do try to do more than 6, you could possibly have an inverse effect on student achievement. So just to give you a question to ponder, what specific changes could you make now to improve the opportunities for success? If you know there's too much on the plate, how could we go ahead and start reducing that so that we could get to no more than 3? What would you say? How would you describe your current improvement efforts, either in your district or in your school? We're going to look at it kind of from a Likert scale perspective, chasing squirrels to laser-like focus being 5, chasing squirrels being number 1. You could be somewhere in between. Where do you think you guys are in terms of your current school improvement efforts? All right, Kathy has opened the poll. Great. I see some folks being nice. Honest, good. This is anonymous. Fantastic.
Give another couple of seconds here. And also, if we can remind everyone, if they have questions, please use your question function. Lissa is very happy to answer any questions that you may have and would like to share out. Okay, I think we'll give it another 3 seconds, and we'll close the poll and take a look. Here we go. Here's results, Lissa.
All right, fantastic. So it looks like our majority is definitely at between the 1 to 3, chasing squirrels. Many of you are right in the middle. So you're probably working really hard, but maybe don't feel as though that you're as focused as you'd like to be. And then we do have several, about 18% of you said that you're on the higher end, closer to that laser-like focus, which is fantastic. So I appreciate you looking at this from that lens, and certainly do encourage you that if you think that the protocol that I shared with you, the Weed the Garden protocol, would be helpful to you, I would encourage you to think about that and really engage your leadership at the district or school level about, just thinking, what are the things that we have on our plate right now, and how can we reduce that to have better implementation?
Okay, and Lissa, we have a very strong comment and support of what you're saying, and I believe, and I apologize if I'm pronouncing your name wrong, but I believe it's Julio. I am not in a turnaround school, but could very well be with my demographics if I didn't have strong, systematic processes in place with solid implementation and monitoring, and then goes on to say, so it's like laser-like focus for now. And then Dawn has indicated that we try to do too much, implement too many things, and never implement one thing very well, which certainly seems to be so many's story. And also thank you, Julio, again for saying that this is a great presentation. So it seems like everybody is sharing very much the same pain points.
The same sentiment. Well, good. Well, it's nice that we have some folks that feel like you're laser-like focused, and I like how Julio said for now. That takes relentless effort on the part of leaders to maintain that. That with new staff, new students, you're constantly changing, new initiatives, new accountability. To keep that laser-like focus on teaching and learning is always a challenge. So I appreciate your comments very much. Please keep them coming. It's always more fun for all of us if this is a very interactive presentation. So thank you. So one of the things I would like to explore is, are there schools getting results, and what are the contributing factors? One of the things, I mean, certainly you all have fabulous stories of schools that are truly turning around and making huge gains. And we have the great fortune of working with several schools as well, and we actually partner with schools that, as shoulder-to-shoulder partners. We have a whole team for school improvement that go to certain schools that we partner with, and with a school improvement coach, an advisor that works with the district and the school, professional development associates that provide timely, relevant professional development based on the needs assessments, and really that ongoing monitoring that sometimes schools and districts really appreciate in terms of just kind of adding another layer of capacity to serve these most needy schools. Bruce Drysdale is one of the schools that we've been serving for a while, and we're very proud of Chris Smith and her team and what they've been able to accomplish in a very short amount of time. This school actually began with the implementation of data teams and really looking at a strong literacy focus because their students were so far behind in reading. And they also looked very closely at not only the guided reading, reciprocal teaching, but we also did a lot with assessment to make sure that we were assessing the priority standards in the school. This school in 1 year exceeded expected student growth outcomes, and they met 29 out of 29 of their AMOs, because this was last year when they were still on No Child Left Behind measures, and they met 32 out of 33 of their state targets. And after 1 year working with Bruce Drysdale, we're so pleased. So there are schools that are definitely seeing the results of their hard work. But Chris Smith, the principal, we have her success story online if you're wanting to read more about what this school has been able to accomplish. She would tell you that she lacked focus. She wasn't sure how to implement, and having the additional assistance and the 9 foundational practices and a school improvement coach coming back in monthly to work with the school to make sure that focus was maintained made all the difference in the world. So,
and Lissa?
Yes.
As we're Drysdale, and some other questions have come up, and one of which is one, and this is perfect timing, is from Jen. What kind of value would you say leadership coaching plays in this process? And you were just addressing that as a follow-up also with Bruce Drysdale.
Wow, that is a great question, Jen. Thank you for posing it. One of the things that is really tough when you're a principal in a school that is in a situation where you're serving a tough population, whether you're on a list or not, and you're serving a tough population, it's a hard place to be. And the principal chair is sometimes a very lonely spot. So the benefit of leadership coaching and school improvement coaching is that our coaches go in and they work directly with the principals, not only as a confidant, but as a true coach. So someone that they can share things with, but that we can actually also share best practices and make recommendations for next steps. And there are so many things on the principal's plate that having that additional support and that capacity makes a world of difference, because nobody needs to be doing this alone. Just like in the quote, from the Secretary of Education at the beginning of the presentation, at the Leadership and Learning Center, we are just as committed to your students' achievement as you are. And the center is made up of educators and leaders and teachers, and that's what we want to do. So the benefits of leadership coaching are immeasurable. Great question.
And Amy actually, and along with that, it says, what are some small steps leaders can take to better implement plans and monitor results besides limit initiatives?
Wow. So great question. So first, limit initiatives. Second would be to make sure that we have communicated clear expectations. And that means with your building leadership team, principals need to make sure that everybody understands exactly what the efforts are in terms of improvement. Very clear expectations about the monitoring and what we're supposed to teach. You would be surprised when we have state-adopted curriculums, we make an assumption that everybody knows what they're supposed to be teaching, and that's not always true. And so making sure you have limited initiatives, making sure that everybody understands what the expectations are. And then the third thing would be get out into the classroom and see what's happening. And that is probably one of the biggest barriers that I find for leaders is that with everything else going on, parents showing up at your doorstep first thing in the morning, to a child, crying by lunch, whatever it is, there's always something. But leaders that make time to go out into classrooms and watch, listen, talk to students, and observe, you will get a much better sense about what's happening in your building so that you can make better plans moving forward. So those would be a couple of the biggest steps that I would say right off the bat that principals could do. Great question. Perfect. Are there any other questions?
At this point, I believe that's it.
Awesome. Okay. Fantastic. So we're very proud to have Bruce Drysdale as one of our partner schools, and we would invite you to, again, pose any additional questions as we're kind of wrapping up here, but we would encourage you that if you're interested in more information about our school improvement partnerships, any partnership research, federal guidelines, we have lots of resources on our Lead and Learn website that are designed for you to go and use with your teams, explore. So please, we would encourage you to find those great things in our resource center. As well, we would also, again, remind you that, if you could join us for one of these school improvement summits, this is just really a small taste of the kinds of breakout sessions and learning experiences that we're providing in our summits, where we really dig deeper into assessment and feedback and culture building, all tied around those 9 foundational practices. So if you can join us for one of these summits, we would love to see you there. And then finally, if we don't have any additional questions, Kathy, do you have any additional questions?
No, there is one comment by Julio, and just to add that it is important that those principals who have instructional coaches, that they use them wisely and monitor what they are doing to help teachers.
Oh, excellent point. Excellent point. It kind of goes back to that communicating expectations for the adults in the building primarily. So making sure that everybody understands what we're supposed to be doing, but then that we're also, that third thing was monitoring. And perfect. That's a great question. Sometimes we find that not all staff are utilized to the best of their the intention. So thank you for that.
And that is it for right now.
That's it? All right. Well, we hope that we appreciate so much you spending 45 minutes of your busy day with us to have some conversation and explore school improvement. We know that turning around schools is tough work, and we appreciate so much everything that you do in our districts and schools across the nation every day on behalf of our students. We appreciate you joining us. If you have any questions about our discussion, again, you can contact me directly, or please feel free to contact my colleague Kyle Helfrich, our National Sales Manager. Either one of us would be happy to help you. And again, we hope that you visit our Lead and Learn website and follow us at Lead and Learn on Twitter. All right, thank you so much for joining us, and then we hope you have a wonderful afternoon.